I always imagined that my wedding would be the happiest day of my life. Ever since I was a little girl, I dreamed of a flawless white dress, an elegant ceremony, and a perfect future with a man who loved me unconditionally. For a long time, I believed that Daniel was that man. Daniel was everything I had ever wanted: smart, successful, and the owner of a small company that was growing rapidly in the financial market. With him, I felt safe, as if my future was guaranteed. I imagined our lives surrounded by stability, a beautiful house in a noble neighborhood, trips around the world, and maybe one day, a family. But that day, instead of walking down the aisle towards my fiancée, I was locked in a hotel room, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My wedding dress, an expensive and meticulously chosen model, seemed like a cruel joke now. My phone was vibrating non-stop: messages, calls, notifications. I knew what they said before I even read them. My sister was the first to call me, her voice shaking with shock and anger. "Isabella, you won't believe what I've just seen." But I did, because deep down, something inside me already knew. Minutes before the ceremony, a video began to circulate among the guests. Daniel, my fiancé, was kissing my best friend Camila in an expensive restaurant the night before the wedding. The video showed the two of them holding hands, laughing, toasting, what seemed to be an early celebration of my humiliation. My stomach churned. A wave of hot and cold ran through my body. This couldn't be real, but it was. Camila, the woman who had been by my side for every choice at the wedding, who helped me choose the dress, who held my hand when I got nervous about the preparations, was apparently holding my fiancé's hand too. I felt panic choking me. I couldn't leave that room. I couldn't face the guests. I couldn't face myself. So, I did the only thing that seemed logical at that moment. I ran away. I dropped my cell phone on the bed, took off my shoes, and ran. I ran down the hotel corridor, through the lobby, ignoring the receptionist's curious glances. My flawless makeup was already stained with tears before I even got into the first cab I came across. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked, as I tried to control my breathing. I had no idea. My world had collapsed in a matter of minutes. What would I do now? Go home? And the party before it had even started? Then, my voice breaking, I mumbled, "The only thing that made sense: anywhere that has enough alcohol to make me forget tonight." The driver nodded and took me to a small bar in the city center. The kind of place I would never go to under normal circumstances: dark, stuffy, with low music and the smell of cheap whiskey. I sat down at the counter and ordered a strong drink, something to numb the pain and shame that were eating away at me. That's when I saw him. A man sitting a few stools in front of me. He didn't look like he belonged there. There was something about his posture, the way he held his glass with a distant air, as if he was there by accident. His gaze met mine for a moment, and for some reason, I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Rough night?" he asked, his voice low and husky as he turned the glass around in his hands. I let out a bitter laugh. "You have no idea." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes watching my face as if he was trying to decipher my story without me having to say anything. "Do you want to talk about it, or would you prefer just one more drink?" I hesitated for a moment. But at that moment, with the alcohol starting to kick in and reality seeming unbearable, talking to a stranger seemed like a better idea than facing up to the disaster my life had become. "I think I just need a reason not to go crazy today." He smiled, a subtle, almost enigmatic smile. "Then maybe I can be that reason." I had no idea who he was. All I knew was that, for some reason, at that moment, looking at him made me feel something different. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was desperation, or maybe, without knowing it, I was about to make the most insane decision of my life. I don't know how long I sat in that bar, but with each sip, the feeling of emptiness seemed to grow inside me. The alcohol burned my throat, but it wasn't strong enough to erase the pain of humiliation. The man next to me, that stranger with the attentive eyes and discreet smile, was still there, watching me as if trying to read my thoughts. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked, twirling the glass between his fingers. I let out a dry laugh. "What's there to talk about?" My fiancé cheated on me, everyone found out, and now I'm the joke of the day. What could be funnier than that? He didn't laugh. He just tilted his head slightly, as if absorbing my words. Well, I don't know you, but I can tell you one thing for sure. He did you a favor. I arched my eyebrows in surprise at his confidence. And how can you be so sure of that? He took a small sip of his drink before answering, because any man who would leave you for another woman clearly doesn't deserve you. And because I know how to recognize someone who is worth it. For a moment, my heart skipped a beat. There was something about the way he said it, with conviction, without hesitation, as if he really believed his words. As if he was seeing me in a way that I couldn't see myself at that moment. The silence between us was filled by the muffled noise of the background music and the scattered conversations around us. What about you? I asked, trying to take my mind off the disaster in my life. What's a guy like you doing alone in a bar like this? He smiled, as if he'd been expecting this question. Sometimes I like places where nobody knows me. It helps me remember that at the end of the day, I'm just another normal guy. I frowned. Something about the way he said it seemed strange, but I wasn't sober enough to analyze it further. So, maybe on impulse, maybe alcohol, maybe out of desperation, I did something I never imagined I would do. If I said I wanted to get married today, would you say yes? The sentence was out of my mouth before I could stop myself. He blinked, surprised, but didn't seem to laugh at the absurd idea as I had expected. Get married just like that? I nodded. Why not? My wedding was already scheduled for today. I have a wedding dress that will never be worn. I don't want to go home and hear people asking me how I am. I want to do something completely insane. Something that nobody expects. He looked at me for a long moment, evaluating my words. Are you sure about that? No, but nothing in my life seems to make sense right now. And I don't think I want to sober up and realize how pathetic that idea really is. To my surprise, he laughed softly and shook his head. Well, I'm a man who likes a challenge. And marrying a beautiful but completely impulsive woman sounds like an interesting challenge. I blinked in surprise. Was that a yes? He finished his drink and put the glass on the counter. Yes, but only if you tell me your name first. I laughed, perhaps for the first time that night. Isabella. Nice to meet you, Isabella. I'm Leon, and I think we've just made the craziest decision of our lives. And that's how, without thinking, without planning, without caring about the consequences, I married a complete stranger that very night. What I didn't know was that this man, who seemed to have nothing but his clothes on, held a secret that would change everything. I still thought I was running away from my past, but in reality, I was running straight towards my destination. The night passed like a blur, between rushed signatures, a sleepy justice of the peace, and a cheap ring bought in a hurry from a 24-hour shop. I became the wife of a complete stranger. I woke up with a slight headache and an emptiness in my stomach that didn't just come from a hangover. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at my hand. The thin ring seemed as real as everything that had happened. So it wasn't a dream, I mumbled, running my hand over my face. The sound of a kettle whistling made me realize that I wasn't alone. I looked around and saw Leon standing in the apartment's small kitchen. He was shirtless, wearing only dark sweatpants, and was calmly working on the stove. He didn't look shaken or sorry. On the contrary, he was calm, almost amused by the situation. Good morning, wife, he looked at me over his shoulder, a discreet smile on his lips. I blinked a few times, trying to take in the scene. This really happened? Believe it or not, yes. And now you have a husband who makes breakfast. A good deal, don't you think? I let out a sigh and sank into my hands. My God, what have I done? Leon approached, placing a hot mug next to me. You made an impulsive decision, but you know what? Sometimes the best things in life happen when you stop planning so much. I looked up at him, trying to find some clue that he was as lost as I was. But Leon seemed completely at ease, as if he had married a stranger before breakfast many times. Aren't you the least bit sorry? I asked. He shrugged. Should I be? I liked your courage, and anyway, a marriage is only a problem if you decide it is. You can look at it as a great adventure, or as a mistake you'll regret forever. You choose. I wanted to argue, but deep down, part of me knew that going back would only make me face the shame and the inevitable questions about Daniel and Camila. Staying meant not having to deal with that for the time being. So, what happens now? I asked, crossing my arms. Now, we try to find out if we can live under the same roof without going crazy, he smiled sideways. If you want, you can stay here until you decide what you want to do. No pressure. I stayed silent, watching the steam rise from my mug. For some reason, the idea of leaving didn't seem as appealing as I thought it would. I should have been worried. I should have been thinking about how to get out of that situation and get my life back on track. But instead, I felt that there was something about Leon that I still needed to find out, and part of me really wanted to know what it was. The next few days were unexpectedly quiet. I should have been desperate to get away from that absurd situation, but strangely, I wasn't. Perhaps it was the fact that no one knew where I was, and that gave me a strange feeling of control, as if for a moment, I had disappeared from the chaos and judgmental stares. Leon didn't ask too many questions, nor did he try to force any intimacy between us. He just existed next to me in a natural way, as if we had been companions for years and not two strangers who had drunkenly signed a marriage contract. He worked a few hours a day, leaving early and returning in the afternoon, always with a bag of shopping in his hand. He cooked for both of us, and although I insisted on giving something back, he always said, "So consider it part of the marriage package, wife." The way he said it always made me smile. But then, I started to notice the little details. At first, they were silly things, like the fact that he had calloused hands but walked with the posture of a man used to sophisticated places. Or the fact that despite claiming to do odd jobs, he always wore well-kept clothes, as if he was used to a much higher standard of living than he appeared to have. And then came the things that really intrigued me. One afternoon, I went to a small cafe near the apartment to get a coffee and a sandwich. As I was leaving, I noticed a man in a dark suit, looking at me in a way that made me shudder. I hurried my step. But before I could leave, he approached. "Miss Hamilton." The name made me freeze. I turned around slowly, my heart racing. "What did you say?" The man hesitated, frowning as if he had made a mistake. "Excuse me, ma'am. I think I mistook you for someone else." He walked away quickly, leaving me standing there, confused. Hamilton. Was it a mistake? Or did Leon have a surname he never mentioned? When I got back to the apartment, I tried to act normally, but something inside me was already on alert. That evening, Leon arrived later than usual. When he came in, he was carrying a shopping bag and a bottle of wine. "What are we celebrating?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation casual. "Nothing. I just thought it would be nice to have a decent dinner." He seemed relaxed as always, but I couldn't ignore the discomfort growing inside me. During dinner, I watched his gestures, his glances, the way he avoided talking about what he did when he went out. And then, without thinking too much, I asked, "Leon, what's your surname?" He paused for a second before answering. "Why do you want to know?" "Just curious." He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that looked like a warning. "Hamilton." My heart leapt. Hamilton? The same name that man in the cafe had called me? Why didn't you tell me before? He leaned back, resting his arm on the back of the chair. "I never asked yours, so I thought we were even." I pressed my lips together. He was playing games with me. I knew there was something he didn't want to tell me. And the more he tried to hide it, the more I felt that I was about to discover something that would change everything. After that night, I couldn't look at Leon the same way anymore. I wanted to believe that it was just a coincidence. That the man in the cafe had really been mistaken. But my intuition screamed that something was wrong. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more the details piled up. Leon never said exactly where he worked. He went out without a uniform, without a badge, without any indication of what he did for a living. He always paid for everything in cash. Never a credit card. Never a document. And strangely, he seemed to know far too much about the business world for someone who claimed to do casual work. Then, one evening, I decided to follow him. He left around 8, as he sometimes did, saying he'd be back late. I waited a few minutes before getting a cab and telling the driver, "Just follow that man." The car followed Leon from a distance as he walked through the brightly lit streets of the city. At first, there seemed to be no clear destination. But then, he entered a luxurious building, one with a shiny glass facade and private security at the door. The doorman opened the doors for him as if he knew him well. My heart was pounding. I asked the cab to stop across the street and watched. What was a supposedly humble man doing in a building of that level? Before I could hesitate, I got out of the car and crossed the street. The security guard stopped me immediately. "Ma'am, this is a private corporate building. You need a badge to enter." I took a deep breath, trying to look confident. "I'm looking for Leon Hamilton." The security guard exchanged a glance with his colleague before asking, "Do you have an appointment with the CEO?" My stomach churned. CEO? I blinked, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Leon, my husband, the man who cooked for me every night, who lived in a modest apartment, who never mentioned his profession, was the CEO of that company? I tried not to show my shock. "I need to see him. It's personal." The security guard hesitated before speaking into his radio. A few minutes later, an assistant appeared, looking at me curiously. "Mr. Hamilton is in a meeting at the moment. May I inform him of your visit?" Before I could answer, the elevator door opened. And there he was. Wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit, with a luxury watch on his wrist, and a posture I'd never seen before. Owner of the place. Leon saw me and froze for a moment. But then, he pulled himself together and walked toward me. "Isabella. So that's how you work as CEO?" My voice came out firmer than I expected. He sighed, as if he knew the moment was coming. "We need to talk." He took my hand, ignoring the curious looks around us, and led me to a private elevator. The silence between us was heavy. When the doors opened, we entered a luxurious office with glass walls and a panoramic view of the city. I turned to him, crossing my arms. "Why did you lie to me?" Leon wiped his hands across his face, looking exhausted. "I never lied. You never asked. Don't play games with me, Leon. You let me believe you were an ordinary man." He stared at me for a long moment, then walked over to a table and picked up a glass of whiskey, taking a sip before replying. "Because I wanted to know who you were, without the weight of my name." My chest rose and fell in short breaths. "And what did you find out?" He smiled. "That you're the most unpredictable woman I've ever met." I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream. But all I could think was, I married a billionaire, and I had no idea. I was about to explode. Every cell in my body demanded answers. "Did you want to know who I was?" My voice came out full of irony. "Leon, I married a stranger. A man I thought was simple, humble. Someone like me." He put his glass down slowly on the table, crossing his arms, that calculated posture that I now understood perfectly. "And you still think I'm a stranger?" I opened my mouth to reply, but the truth hit me like a punch. No. I knew Leon. The man who looked at me as if he could decipher me with a single glance. The man who cooked every night, who listened to me without judgment, who never tried to fix me, just stayed by my side. I knew him. But not the billionaire. Not the CEO. Not the Hamilton who ran a financial empire while I thought he did odd jobs. "Why did you keep this from me?" I asked, my voice now more restrained, as if I were trying to understand where everything had gone wrong. He took a deep breath. Because every woman who comes into my life sees the money first. The expensive dinners, the exclusive invitations, the $1 million gifts. I needed to know if you liked me, just me. My eyes burned. And you decided that the best way to do that was to let me believe that I was married to a guy who barely had enough money to pay the rent? He nodded without looking away. I needed to see who you were when there was no fortune involved. Part of me understood. The other part wanted to break up that whole office. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to organize my own thoughts. Do you have any idea what this means to me? What it means to realize that once again, I've been duped? Leon narrowed his eyes, as if my words had really hit him. I never wanted to deceive you, Isabella. But if I had told you at the beginning, would you have stayed? The silence fell heavy between us. I didn't know the answer. Because everything would have been different. I would have closed myself off. I would have doubted his every move. I would have wondered all the time if he was testing me. But now it was too late to pretend that it didn't matter. I walked away, feeling that if I stood there for another second, would say something I couldn't take back. I need some time. I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten, as if to stop me from going. But Leon didn't try to hold me back. He just nodded. If that's your choice, I respect it. The words were simple, but his eyes said something completely different. You can run away from me, but not from what you feel in your heart. I left without looking back. But the truth was, no matter how hard I ran, I couldn't escape the only thing that really mattered. I spent the next few days trying to forget Leon. I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter. That I could just get on with my life. Start again. But the truth was cruel. Every detail of him was on me, the way he held his coffee cup in the morning, the quiet way he cooked while pretending not to notice me watching him, the way he looked at me as if he knew all my secrets before I even told them. And now, without him, everything seemed empty. But what kept me awake for nights on end was realizing something I didn't want to admit. He had never hurt me. Unlike Daniel, he never deceived me to benefit himself. He never played games with me. He never manipulated me. He just wanted to know if, without all the weight of his fortune, would still choose to stay. And now, the choice was mine. That night, I made a decision. I took a cab and, for the first time, went to him, without fear of what would happen next. When I arrived at the Hamilton Enterprises building, I didn't need to ask permission. The security guard already knew who I was. He's at the company's charity event. I thanked him and made my way to the hotel lounge where the reception was taking place. My heart was beating fast. Leon was there, and it was impossible not to notice him. The ceremony wasn't grand, but it was perfect. On a quiet cliffside overlooking the ocean, with the wind gently playing with my hair and the sound of waves crashing far below, we said, "I do," all over again, this time with no secrets, no masks, just truth between us. There were only a few close friends, the sunset, and a violinist playing softly in the background. Leon stood before me, no longer just the mystery man I once married, but the one I truly knew, his strengths, his flaws, his past, and everything in between. When he slid the new ring onto my finger, my heart didn't race from uncertainty, it beat with clarity. This was our second beginning. After the ceremony, we stayed up all night talking. No champagne, no big party. Just two people wrapped in blankets under the stars, sharing dreams, fears, and quiet laughter. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You know, Isabella, you were never just a test for me. You were the answer I didn't know I needed." Tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of peace. Because for once in my life, I wasn't questioning if I was enough. I wasn't wondering what came next. I was exactly where I was meant to be. And as we sat there, the wind brushing against our skin and the moon glowing above, I realized something beautiful. I didn't marry a billionaire. I married a man who chose love over everything else. And I, in return, chose him, over every fear, every doubt, every storm. This time, forever felt real.